I was drawn to Jesus since the first time I laid eyes on him. 3 years later, I stood by as he was crucified. My name is Nicodemus, and the first time I heard Jesus speak was in Jerusalem. He preached with power and conviction, and his words were accompanied by the most remarkable deeds. The sick were healed, sinners came to God, and demons were cast out. He had a knack, however, for alienating my colleagues in the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council. He healed on the Sabbath. He did not follow our rituals and customs, and he had the irritating habit of pointing out our hypocrisy. Yet, perhaps for these very reasons, I was drawn to him. I could not let my colleagues know of my interest in this radical preacher. When I finally met with him, I requested a meeting by night so that no one would see us together. It was at that meeting that he looked me in the eyes and said, "Nicodemus, you must be born again. You must be born not only of water, but of the Spirit as well." What an utterly odd thing to say, but it was just like Jesus. I left him that night confused, feeling like I, a scholar and leader among our people, was a mere child in the eyes of this man. Once more, I was deeply drawn to him. The night before Jesus was crucified, the Sanhedrin had been called together for a hastily arranged meeting. My heart sank when Jesus was brought in by the temple guard. I'm ashamed to say that I was silent as the others called for his death. I wanted to speak up for him, but I was too afraid. I knew I could lose everything if I spoke out against the high priest and the others involved in this charade. Even now, I'm embarrassed to tell you of my cowardice. That night, he was sentenced to die, and I said nothing. I was so ashamed I dared not even look up at him as he stood there like a lamb before the butchers. The next morning, as they led him to be crucified, I wanted to run and hide. Yet I knew that by my silence I had allowed this to happen. I decided that at least I could have the courage to show up and see what my silence had caused. I wanted him to see in my eyes my sorrow and pain and the deep regret I felt in not speaking out for him. The women came to him just before he was crucified. They were given permission to offer him one last drink. The Romans did not know that the women, in compassion, had laced the cup of wine with gall, meant to deaden the pain. He tasted it, but noting its bitterness and understanding what they were doing, he refused to drink it. I turned away as he was nailed to the cross, and then I watched in silent agony as his cross was raised. I listened as my fellow priests hurled insults. Still, I was silent. After some time, the soldiers mocked him, offering him wine, a kind of toast to the crucified king, but they kept it just out of reach as he sought to drink. Near the end of the ordeal, after he had hung there for 6 hours, he spoke again. He hadn't said a word in hours. He said, "I thirst." I could not stand it anymore. At this point, watching him die, I found some small amount of courage. I no longer cared what anyone else thought. I took a branch, fastened a sponge to it, and dipped it in wine vinegar, and I lifted it to his lips. He drank from the sponge, and shortly after, he breathed his last.